Okay, so I'll talk about kidney exchange in this part. There's quite some activity on this. So how do I get rid of this? Okay. Okay. In kidney, let me start by a little bit of background to tell you what is kidney exchange. So first of all, some numbers. Here's some numbers, and people who are waiting for kidneys in the U.S. You see here, there's more than 90,000 patients on the waiting list. Actually, more that are not just not listed, but still need a kidney. But somehow there's just 90,000. And you see that these numbers are growing every year. In 2011, 33,000 patients were added to the waiting list, and only 27,000 removed. Those are removed, or some of them are removed because of they get a kidney from a deceased donor. Some get the kidney from a living donor. Some die. Some get just too sick to get transplanted, and so forth. There's other reasons that people are removed. They go to another country to get a kidney, and so forth. But so, at least in the U.S. and most countries in the world, except in Iran or in the black market, you cannot use money to get kidneys. And sometimes donors are incompatible with the intended recipients, and that opens the door for exchange. So exchange, if you want to give to your beloved one a kidney and you're incompatible, perhaps you can swap with some other incompatible pair. So here is an example for an exchange. Donor 1 and recipient 1 is an incompatible pair, and they're incompatible here because of blood type. And donor 2 and recipient 2 are incompatible because of blood types. So donor 1 can give to recipient 2, and donor 2 can give to recipient 1. Okay, and yet you can do three-way exchanges, and you can do more. Here's a three-way exchange. And in general, you can model this as a graph. Here's the pairs are the nodes. So that each pair has a patient and a donor. Some nodes are, sometimes we see non-directed donors who are just willing to give a kidney to someone they don't know without expecting to get back anything. And you're looking for those cycles. So here's a three-way cycle. Here's a two-way cycle. Every pair, of course, can participate in only one exchange. So sometimes when we see those non-directed donors, they can start a chain. They don't have to get back because there's no patient here. So you're looking for those kind of allocations. So this thing is happening in practice now in the US and many other countries. Some are smaller exchange programs, some are bigger. And there's a lot of literature going on in economics, in medical literature, in CS. So one work I want to mention already now, is the first one by Abra, Blum, and Sandon, is that finding those exchanges if you limit the size of the cycles to be at most 3 or at most 4, up to some size, but allow it more than 2, then it's going to be a hard problem to find those allocations. Okay, so we're looking for exclusive cycles, disjoint cycles, up to some given size. It's going to be a hard problem. And what they do is they show this, and they also develop an algorithm that is going to find a maximum allocation in pretty large pools. So they use some OR techniques that I want to get into. So here's what's going on in a couple of exchange programs in the US. The Alliance for Pair Donation in Ohio has now 81 hospitals registered, and they report their patients and their donors, their incompatible pairs, to the program. Sometimes there's an altruistic donor that comes and they report to the program. And 70 hospitals are registered to National Kidney Registry, and those numbers are growing. And UNOS is supposed to be the national. UNOS is the United Network for Organ Sharing. They started a program in 2010. So far, it's the smallest, but it's growing slowly. And there's a couple of others, but smaller ones. And so again, you want to really get all those pairs together and find those possible exchanges. Yes.
What does it mean that a hospital is registered?
So there's an exchange program, and hospital. Hospitals are participating by sharing their pairs. No, no, no. They can do anything they want. That's a good point. We'll get to. So for 80 hospitals, don't call it registered. They just tell the program that they're going to share their pairs. They're not always sharing their pairs. There's no commitment. You can't have a contract about it. You might have you can try to form a contract, but it's right now it's not happening. So just about the medical. How do you decide if someone is compatible? There are two things. There's the blood type compatibility. So O can give to everyone, but he can only get received from himself. So O patients are in worse shape than others. They can only get from O donors. And there's tissue type compatibility. So basically, every one of us, when I'm getting a blood transfusion, I get a kidney, and maybe I need another one. I develop antibodies against other people, and I'm less likely to get a kidney from some random person. Okay, so the more antibodies I have, most people are low sensitized, and sometimes this measure is sometimes called, this is PRA, panel reactive antibody, and this measures how likely you're not to get a kidney from a random person in the population. So most people are low sensitized, but after if you're going to get a kidney, you're most likely going to need another one after 15 or 20 years or 30 years, depending. For example, for getting from a live donor, you get twice as much as years than from a deceased donor. And sometimes also those transplantations don't work, and you need quickly another kidney and so forth. Yeah?
For the tissue type compatibility, does it depend on who the donor is? If it's somebody that's closely related to you, are you less likely to have a reaction?
So yes and no, depends. If I have a spouse and I'm having a kid with her, then the kid is less likely to. Then I'm less likely to get now her antigens, and depends. So it depends. If some twins are most likely not to have antibodies to one each other, and so forth. But it also depends how good the match is if you're more related. But in general. So there's a little bit of, it helps a little bit, but not always. That's the answer to that. Most people, okay, we'll see. We'll talk a little bit about this tissue type thing. So here's some statistics from Yunus about blood types and other things that you just asked, and the sensitivity. But okay, so one way to go and deal with this is, for now I'll just define that we're going to look at random compatibility graphs. I also talk about non-random situations, but think about the graphs again. The nodes are the incompatible pairs, and link is, I'm going to have a link to you if the donor of the pair that I'm involved in is compatible to the patient in the other pair. So you can create a random graph like this by drawing pairs, by drawing, for example, the blood type according to the distribution of the patient, the blood type of the donor, seeing if the patient is compatible with the donor. If they're compatible, they're not going to join the exchange. They're just going to get a transplantation directly. And if they're incompatible, they join the pool. After I get n nodes, I can start drawing links from one node to another with some probability according to the sensitivity that I have drawn for you according to the distribution we have. Okay, so you can create like this a random graph. And you want to ask one question is, how will efficient allocations look like? What are the size of exchanges that we need, and so forth. Okay, so I'm sorry, I want to go back to here. There's something important that I didn't mention. So before I'm talking about the sizes of cycles and so forth, what happens in practice is those cycles have to be short in practice, at least now. So, and the reason for that is is two things. It's composed from two things. One is that it follows from incentives issues. So if donor 1 gives to recipient 2 today, and only tomorrow donor 2 is going to give to recipient 1, and for some reason donor 2 got sick or is not willing to do this transplantation anymore, is afraid or I don't know what, then recipient 1 is left without a kidney, but also without a donor to exchange with someone else. So he's worse off both because he doesn't have this kidney of donor 2, and he cannot participate in the exchange anymore, unless we promise him. But he's really worse off. So you want to do those. You want to do them simultaneously, and doing simultaneously means that every transplantation here you need a surgical team, you need a surgical room, and all these logistics you can't really coordinate when cycles of length 4 or more than that. 4 maybe, but more than that is going to be really tough. So in practice, those cycles are at most 2-way or 3-way cycles. Okay? So one question you want to ask now, how much efficiency are we losing in practice if we're limiting ourselves to only 2-way and 3-way cycles? Okay? And one way to go is with those random graphs. And to answer this question, we're going to use a tool, results from Erdos Reni, a result by Erdos Reni that says that if you have a random graph with n nodes and probability p for every edge, there's going to be a perfect matching in this graph. Either you can do it for also bipartite, and you can also extend it for 3-way, so 3 sets of nodes, and that nodes from one set can connect only to one, the nodes from the second set, and nodes from the second set can connect only to nodes from the third set, and so forth. So you can extend these as long as p is high enough. Okay? In practice, my compatibility to you does not depend on the size of the pool, but this will be the assumption for now, that it's a high probability. And then you can use this theorem to get this characterization that you don't need actually more than 2-way or 3-way cycles in order to get the maximum number of transplants. So what you see here is basically, these are all the nodes that have an O patient and an A donor. Okay, these are all the nodes that have, all the pairs that have A patient and an O donor, and so forth. Okay? So the left is the patient, the right is the donor. And if I'm going to just restrict myself from the attention to just these two, for example, BA and AB, it's a bipartite Erdos Reni graph that then everybody's going to be matched to each other. Okay? At least one side is going to be completely matched. The other side is only going to be completely matched, almost completely matched. Maybe a few will not be because the size of those graphs might be a little bit different. Okay? The difference in size will be order of square root n. And that's how so you can match all the AOs to the OAs. The leftover here you can do in 3 ways, and so forth. All these you can match to this. And now why am I saying that you can match all the AOs to the OAs? There's going to be more OAs than AOs. And the reason for that is because lots of patients that have A blood type are compatible with the O donors, and they never join the exchange program. Okay, but the opposite is not true. The O patients with A donor are incompatible because they don't have blood type. They're not blood type compatible, and they definitely join. So there are going to be fewer of these than these. It's about a third, and all of those can be matched to those guys. Sometimes we'll call these guys over-demanded pairs. Okay, so it's really those guys are competing to get matched from them. So this is how an efficient allocation looks like. If this is an AA pair, all the AA pairs, they can match to each other using the Erdos Reni result and so forth. Okay, so all the shaded ones, you can think about them as, at least those ones are over-demanded, and at least those ones are not under-demanded. So, and you can see who's going to be matched, who's not going to be matched sometimes. Some of those are not going to be matched, some of those are not going to be matched, and so forth. Okay, so you don't really need more than 3-way, which is great news for, okay? So I mentioned there's also lots of there's hospitals involved. So when there's lots of hospitals involved, you can think about they're probably going to become players. And indeed, we're observing in practice that those, yeah?
So but if you have the actual data from the system, have you calculated how much more would you have done with extra 4-way matching, 4-way cycles?
So yeah, I will talk about this. So these results is before we actually looked at real actual data, and yeah, I'll get to that. So I'm giving here a survey of basically of the last, at least things that in the last several years. All this kidney exchange program started in the US in 2007. In the beginning was actually people were thinking about even long cycles, but then doctors told them, listen, we need to do those cycles short because we don't have the surgical teams and so forth. And so this is a kind of a survey of the last at least four years, some of the work, 3 years. So there's, whatever hospitals are becoming players, and indeed we see in practice that hospitals are, and it's not hard to see because hospitals also tell you this, that they don't always share all the incompatible pairs in the system. So Mike Reese, which is he's director of the Alliance Pair Donation, he's quite a hero in this kidney exchange thing, and he says that yeah, that we need a better system. And here's why, for example, one example for why hospitals might behave as strategically. So think about so A1 and A2 are two nodes belong to hospital A, okay, and B and C are pairs that belong to some other hospitals. Okay, so if we are in the world here on this side, on this graph, then A1 and A2, hospital A can match internally in a two-way exchange, A1 and A2. If they report it to the system, they're still okay because the exchange program can match A1 to B and A2 to C. A1 and A2 are still matched. If I'm a hospital and I care about how many patients I'm matching, or my own patients I'm matching, then maybe I'm in trouble if the world looks like this. If I'm reporting A1 and A2, and B is, for example, a child or is highly sensitized, then the exchange program might match A1 to B, and hospital A is losing one patient. Okay, so and the hospitals tell you sometimes why should we report those guys? Yeah.
The hospitals committed to the match once the registry says here we found a pair, or can they be like, I'm sorry?
They can also say no. So after they offer you a match, that's what you mean. Yeah, so they sometimes say no. And that's a different issue, an open issue to deal with, actually. There's failures because of preferences and, yeah.
But so like in this case, it's possible the hospital will get back that A1 was matched with B and A2 was like...
So A can say no and then go and match himself to A2. They can do that, yeah. Sometimes even if A2 doesn't exist, they can say no for some other reasons. They got a 60-year-old match, and okay. So you want to ask now? Okay, if hospitals are strategic, what can we do in order? Can we develop a mechanism or that doesn't lose much efficiency? So we still want to match as many as possible pairs, but with taking into account incentives. So you can very quickly come up with a bad result if you allow any kinds of graphs, and if you allow cycles of length k larger or equal than 3, you lose and you restrict yourself to individually rational allocations. Individually rational allocation is one that is going to guarantee every hospital the number of pairs that it can match by itself. Then over here you can see that you can lose quite a bit. So if A is the hospital and he has 3 pairs he can match, in order to guarantee him 3 pairs, I have to do just exchange because there's no other way I'm going to match A3. And then instead of matching 6, I'm matching just 3. Okay, I could have chosen those 2 3-way cycles instead. Okay, so in worst case, things can be bad. And there's been some work for k equals 2. And first of all, there's an elegant proof. I won't show it here, that there's no efficient strategy proof mechanisms, even if you consider even if you just allow cycles of length 2. And we showed with Ariel here and other co-authors, Felix and Ian, that if you cannot also guarantee half the maximum allocation. If you look at the deterministic mechanism, then you have also a lower bound for randomized. And we develop a randomized mechanism that guarantees half. Half of the maximum allocation. Now, half is not it's a nice theoretical result, and there's still open questions there, but we want much more than half. Okay. Okay. So we kept on looking in random graphs. Okay, and again, in random graphs, the world is large and nice. There's lots of participants. And what we can show is that if hospitals are not too big, in some sense, that I won't define here specifically, then the maximum individually rational allocation, at least, doesn't lose much. So I can guarantee every hospital the number of pairs he can match by itself, and still be about 1.5 or even less than that percent from the maximum allocation. So if the pool is large enough, then I'm in good shape. And basically, the idea is, I'll just say in a word, is suppose you have this, suppose I'm just looking at those AO guys and the OA guys. So I'm going to look at the hospital. These are nodes of a specific hospital. I'm going to check who are the OAs that he can match by itself. I'm going to mark them. So I'm going to mark all those that the hospitals can match by themselves. If each hospital is not too big, they cannot match too many of those. And the set that I'm choosing is not going to be larger than this. And I can still do a perfect allocation between AOs to OAs. So I don't want to get too much into this, but you can do this in a way that eventually the allocation looks almost like the allocation that we saw for the maximum allocation we saw without incentives. Okay. So, we did some simulations. What if the graph is not too big and you don't lose much if you choose individually rational allocations versus just efficient ones, just ignoring incentives. So you see these are the average, if these are the number of hospitals. Each hospital here was about size between 8 to 14. And you can see that the loss is very small. The cost is very small from choosing an individually rational allocation. So these are the average matches. And, okay. So, but the cost can be high if we're not going to, if we're going to ignore incentives, if we're going to ignore individually rationality. So for example, no, so this is not the way. But I'll convince you that. So here's a current system, okay? That the current system is just matching maximum choosing randomly a maximum allocation with some priority. Sometimes they give priority to highly sensitized. It depends on the program. Sometimes to very young people, but those priorities are a little bit different from place to place. Then there's this National Kidney Registry program that doesn't have at all priorities, at least except one thing that is a bit graph theoretic. But if I'm choosing randomly a maximum allocation and there's many more OAs than AOs, and my hospital has exactly this internal match, I don't want to show it. Because if this AO will surely be matched to someone, and if now my other OA is going to compete on some of those AOs, he has a positive probability, a significant probability not to be matched. So this guy will be matched for sure, but this guy I'm worried about. So I really want to look at individually rational locations. But it turns out that individual rationality by itself is not enough. I'll just give the intuition here. Suppose my hospital, I'm the player, I have this kind of graph, then at least under the distributions that we see in practice, if I can either match this one internally or this one internally. So if the program has to promise me that at least two of my pairs should be matched. Not necessarily to each other, but have to be matched. Okay? So if I'm the hospital, maybe I want to hide this guy, see what the exchange program is going to match for me. If he matches this one, then I'm going to match internally this after. And doesn't match this one, I'll match internally these two. And if it matches this, I'm going to match internally afterwards these two. So and if both of them are matched, maybe I'm screwed, but I can put this guy maybe in the next month in the system, and he will be matched because those guys are easy to match, relatively easy to match. But so we come up with some kind of a mechanism that has the idea is really to give incentive to get. I want to give you incentive to put those over-demanded pairs that you have, those that are relatively more easy to match because you have a very good donor. So the idea is going to be to give a little bit extra probabilities to those that those hard patients that those under-demanded ones that you can match internally. And so let me say how I'm going to do this. So suppose here there's 4 over-demanded guys. Suppose this graph is large, and I'm just zooming into it and scaling it here, and there's just 4 AO pairs, and there's lots of, so I need to choose 4 guys here that are going to be matched to these guys. Okay, if it's 400 and 400, then I'm good because they can match to each other almost surely in a large graph. So I need to choose somehow 4 here. An individually rational system, all it's going to do is it has to promise hospital A to match only 2 of those guys. You can match these 2. It can match these 2, not necessarily one to each other. What I'm going to do here is, in order to choose 4 guys here, I'm going to choose randomly from the set that A and B can match, each hospital, what they can match by themselves from the under-demanded guys. Okay? Those guys I'm surely going to match. But I'm going to leave A1 and B1 in the pool here. So think about these as lottery cards. And I'm going to choose those cards, but I'm leaving for A and B, I'm leaving those cards in the pool. So I'm resampling them. So A1 and AB will be matched. If I'm sampling again A1, I'm going to match either A2 or A3 for hospital A. So it's really counting how many of your under-demanded guys I want to match for you. Okay, so this is how I'm going to give you extra probability until I reach, and I'm continuing doing this until I reach 4. And this is how I'm going to give you extra probability to show your easy to match ones, your over-demanded pairs. Okay, so and these kind of pairs, those easy to match pairs or over-demanded pairs, are the ones that we often don't see in practice. So we see, and we want them to come into the pool. Questions? Okay, so far, I talked about very large markets. It's all lots of people are participating, and I talked about also another source of donation, which is an altruistic donor. So sometimes we see an altruistic donor who doesn't care to who to give a kidney to, and he starts a chain. Okay? So at the beginning, when altruistic donors came, they were giving a kidney directly to someone on the waiting list. Remember, there's 90,000 people on the waiting list, and there's always someone this altruistic donor is compatible with. And at some point, they started to do chains. So you can use also pairs and end it eventually in the waiting list at some point. Okay, and you see here, this is a three-way exchange. And you can ask yourself, why are there just 6 people in the picture? And part of the reason is because we want those things to be short. Okay, because of all the incentives issues and so forth. But if you look carefully at the reasons we said why a simple cycle has to be short, it's different. It's not going to be the same. It's not going to be hold for a chain. So in the cycle, if this is a two-way cycle and donor 1 gives to recipient 2, if donor 2 gives to recipient 1, and tomorrow donor 1 decides not to give to recipient 2, recipient 2 doesn't get a kidney, but he's also lost his donor to switch with. If you look at a chain, there's this living non-directed donor is giving to recipient 1, and if only tomorrow this donor 1 is giving to recipient 2, recipient 2 doesn't get a kidney, but he still has his donor 2, to participate in a different swap tomorrow. Okay, so the cost is much less. And there was a lot of debate about this, whether to do, okay, maybe we can do things non-simultaneously and have longer chains. And some people were worried about this, but it is happening, and it's now almost a consensus that we allow them at least to be non-simultaneous. Okay? And the question is, yes?
I'm just curious if donor 1, if in the first case donor 1 knows there's like a face attached to the person, donor 1 is like kind of screwing over when he doesn't give a kidney. Mm-hmm. And in the second case, it's maybe not so much because donor R2 is still maybe okay. Does that change the rate that people renege on their promises?
Because you're doing things non-simultaneously?
Yeah, because, I mean, in some ways, like, in the first case, donor 1 might feel really bad because...
But in the first case, this is, we're doing them simultaneously, but you're saying if you're not going to do this simultaneously, are they going to renege more? That's what you're asking? What are you comparing to?
Like in the first one, right? Like D1 might back out the moment after the kidney's out of D2, right?
Okay.
Is that part of the concern?
Yes.
Right. But in that case, he knows exactly who he's hurting, right? So he might feel particularly bad.
So the pairs don't have to know each other. They don't have to see each other.
Really?
Yeah.
So someone gets the kidney and they don't even get a picture of it?
So some places they meet, and some actually the transplant centers prefer not that they don't meet. It depends a lot on the pairs themselves. Yeah, they don't have to meet. But it's a good question about reneging. Suppose we do things non-simultaneously, what's going to happen? And so far, there's been hardly any reneging by those donors that had to participate in the non-simultaneous part. Okay, so here's a first chain that happened from July to 2007. It happened over a year, so you see some of them happened in the same day. For example, these two on the same day, and then these two on the same day, and so forth. But it's over a year. The last donor here is an AB donor who her name is Elena McKinney. She waited almost a year to continue. So you could have ended the chain with giving to someone in the waiting list. The Alliance Pair Donation, who ran this chain, preferred to wait, and it took her a year. But the reason it took her a year is because she's an AB donor. There's almost no AB patients. First of all, the frequency of AB patients in the population is low, it's like 4%. But then every AB patient is at least blood type compatible with any other donor, so there's not many AB patients in the pool itself. So there's a question also how to organize chains, how to do them. And it appeared in the news. After each publicity like this, actually, you get lots of calls from people who want to be altruistic donors. Not all of them are going to be ones, but you get lots of calls from for the program. So Sometimes it's hundreds of people. Sometimes it's just a drunk guy from last night who said, I'm going to be an altruistic donor. So lots of them are not going to be ones. It takes time. You have to go for a psychological process and a medical process. It's not trivial. But, okay, so there was some recent literature about chains, and I'm going to talk more about even more recent. But basically, first of all, the story about the chain was a big issue in the New England Journal of Medicine. And then Gentry and Segev. Segev is a medical guy, is a surgeon, is a transplant surgeon from Johns Hopkins, and Gentry is his wife. They wrote that long chains are not going to be effective. And we wrote that the model, they still don't know how to model things, and they're wrong, and we modeled things, and we saw that it's not correct. And they wrote back, we're wrong, and we wrote back, they're wrong. CMU, Dickerson, and Ariel, and Sandom wrote an extensive simulation paper showing more when are things good, when do you want longer chains, when you don't. Think about this, if I have lots of altruistic donors and 100 altruistic donors and the pool is just of size 100, I don't need long chains. But if we don't have so many altruistic donors, we might want chains. So those papers by Gentry and Segev were actually saying that let's not do chains, but let's not do them, long chains, but let's not do them when we still don't understand anything. We need really to understand when we need long chains, when we don't, and things like that. So writing such a paper can have a bad influence when you don't really know things. You don't want to have a policy that says that's it, we're not doing it. And one of the things that came out of the first paper of Gentry and Segev was that Yunus came up with a policy that we end chains after 3 or after 5 with no reason. Now it's canceled. Now still don't know what's going on, but right now we're looking for long chains.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are these long chains, do they actually show or think they show that they're harmful, or just that they're not really helping you much? Because there seems like a big difference there.
So they say that, actually they say that it's in their model, which is wrong, they also show that, they also show that, they do simulations, but they have some assumptions that it's almost not very good assumptions. Anyway, but they show that you'll get more without longer chains. So in these papers, there was also modeling of renegade. So we were looking over time a bit, and it was just simulation papers that you did some sensitivity analysis on the renegade. If you do things non-simultaneously, so you do maybe the first 3 on the chain you do today, the last guy on the chain becomes a bridge donor, he continues tomorrow, and so forth. So it's and each bridge donor might renege with some probability, and the probabilities there were both too high, but there's also other issues. Yeah.
If somebody reneges, what happens? Do they have to put in like a massive deposit that they don't get back or something? Or is there any sort of disincentive to keep somebody from reneging, or is it just sort of a moral question?
What happens to the person, or what happens to the
person that reneges?
If someone reneges,
yeah.
He reneges. Right now, we're not doing anything. You can think of punishing the transplant center, but that means punishing other patients who didn't renege.
Well, could you force the donor to put in a deposit that they won't get back if they renege? Or something like that?
Buying the kidney, right?
Well, it's not really.
So it's tricky. On one hand, you want to come up with maybe some kind of punishment, move, but maybe just for that. But so what is it? It's that donor that reneges. It's not the transplant center.
Yeah.
What would you do with that? It's tricky. That's a good question. I don't know what. I don't have an answer what to do with that. You can think of if something like that does happen, maybe the patient that is screwed now, that was supposed to get his kidney. So in the chains, it's not. We said it's not a real problem now because in the chain, the patient that didn't get the kidney still has his donor and can participate. So So that's why they do it. The cycles they do simultaneously, and maybe the change they don't. But so you don't need really to do anything because those patients down the chains are still having their donors, and we can still swap with others. Okay. If you go and try to do cycles non-simultaneously, then you have to think about these kind of things. Yeah.
So in the example, the real life example that you gave, it took over a year to go from the first donor to kind of where they were right now in the chain. Do you have any hypotheses for if that would have been a shorter time period for when all of the donors would have been matched had they not done a chain?
If the pool was larger, you might not have done a chain, but the pools grow now, and there are still chains and there are some long chains, you'll see, and they're happening faster today. All kidney exchanges started in 2007, and that time there were not too many. It's still not very large. Until today, so for example, in 2011, there were about, I don't know the exact number, but I know it's more than 450 exchanges done, which is not so transplants from exchanges, which is not a lot, but it's growing very fast. So I assume that in 2012 it's going to be more than 600, but I don't know exactly the numbers because all those numbers are not. Some hospitals are internally matching, and you don't get all those numbers, but it is growing. It's still small. There's 90,000 people on the waiting list, and those exchange programs have, for example, the National Kidney Registry, which is one of the biggest, has like about 330 pairs now registered, which is nothing. Last year they had less than 200. So it is growing, but it's still slow. That's an interesting question, a behavioral question, how to get more people to join this.
Just a real quick implementation question on that previous slide. There we go. The asterisks, this recipient required desensitization.
Yeah.
So I presume that means a non-standard transplant?
Yeah, where are you?
There's one at the bottom.
This one, AB to A.
Yeah.
So there's some desensitization going on sometimes. So not all transplants are doing this. Centers are doing this, and it's not. Yeah.
Is that encoded in the graph when you're looking for cycles, or
so
this is kind of ad hoc in a way?
So those transplant centers that can do it tell you they can do it, and you can find those compatibilities. So in that case, the A one should say that. Yes.
Then is there kind of a reason to route these changes through? Because it looks like you start off with a high value transplant at O, and then you work your way down to like a low value, right? But the desensitization allowed you to increase the value of your chain from A, B to A.
That's right. So it doesn't happen a lot, but so you're saying how to do those? You're asking?
Well, I'm just saying, like, maybe is there a reason to route these long chains through the particular treatment centers that allow you to, like, increase your value?
That lie?
That allow you to...
That allow you
to increase from the low demand to the high demand organs.
So what really matters eventually, in order that the chain will be longer, is how good is my donor now? I'm going to a patient, if I can go to a patient that the donor is good, and then I know I can continue. So here it would be a little bit of trouble because this is an AB donor. So the donor matters a lot. But I'm not going to talk about how to optimize chains here. We didn't do this, but that's an interesting question. Okay, so the question is, do we really need chains? I'm not going to. I'm going to give you some descriptive results about this. Except those simulations that I talked about. So those papers were really to stop this, to not go to policies that are not holding some some real science. And I think we wanted more science, and those other papers in Dickerson are going into more direction of more serious stuff. So if we look at those large graphs, okay, then you can see, remember, if we have so many people in the pool, then we're in good shape. All those shaded guys cannot be, none of them can be matched. And now, if you add a non-directed donor, all you can do is maybe have a three-way chain. So the non-director of blood type O might give to one of those guys that is not matched, who can give to one of those under-demanded guys that is not matched, and maybe to one patient on the waiting list. Okay, so you can think that, okay, why do we need chains? They can be, or we don't, at least we don't need long chains. Maybe three-way chains, okay? But there was, indeed, when you started to look at data, now when you start gathering more data from recent years, we see that there's a big disconnect between the models that we had, the large graphs, and first of all, the pools are not too big, and the P, and it doesn't capture the Eder-Shreni graph that we see in terms of how dense they are, okay? And we do see long chains in practice. We saw this chain, the 10-length chain that happened maybe over time, and we see other chains that are continuously reported also in the news, but NKR is continuously doing chains. Like, that's the significant number of transplants that they get is from chains. Okay, so what we looked at is a little bit about the sensitivity of the patients. And what you see here in the first table is UNOS is the people on the waiting list. So the percentage of people who are low sensitized or easy to match, think about like that, is about 90% from the patients in UNOS. So this is the regular waiting list. Previous simulation did something very close to that. So people there were simulations in previous papers that said, listen, even if pools of size 100, we don't need so long, we don't need long chains. But if we look at data, this is from one data set, and all the data from other data sets is the same. We get that, for example, the highly sensitized is about 50 or 60. This is historical data, and currently snapshots is about 60% people are very highly sensitized. Highly sensitized means usually someone who is not going to get a kidney with probability less than 20, and most of them are less than 95, less than 5% chance to get a kidney. So lots of them are very highly sensitized, and part of this, you see that the number of highly sensitized grows from 51 to 65. Part of it is because the highly sensitized are accumulating over time because they don't get the. So there's several reasons maybe we see those highly sensitized patients, the big difference. First of all, who's going to join the exchange? People who are not compatible. So if I have a blood type compatible donor, I'm more likely to be a highly sensitized pool. So it's already higher than what's going on in humans. But then there's also those hospitals that are hiding pairs or internally matching pairs. Who are they matching? Those easy to match ones. And again, those accumulating highly sensitized pools are also happening. Highly sensitized patients are. So there's really highly sensitized guys. And what we looked at, remember this graph. So for example, these OO guys are going to be in a very nice world. The OO will be matched with themselves. The AA will be matched with themselves. So we zoomed into those graphs. And you see, here's the average PRA in those graphs. And 76, 82, 78 is the percentage that the likelihood that you're not going to match. That's the average PRA, the likelihood that you're not going to match a random donor. And the percentage of high PRA is very high in those guys. And you see that the average PRA for conditional on that your high PRA above 80% not to match someone is very high. It's like 95, 99, 96, which is almost you don't have a chance in the pool if you don't. You have to wait a long time. Okay, so these, and we took these kind of, we also looked at specifically on what will happen if we allow longer chains in the data. So here's looking for, in those data sets, looking for allocations of size, maximum allocations of when allowing cycles of length k equals 2, k equals 3 cycles up to either 2 or 3, and 2 or 3 or 4. These guys are cycles of length 3 and chains unbounded chain, cycles of length 3 and chain of length 5. And these numbers are for when there was just one altruistic donor in the pool. Okay, so you see that this is what we allow cycles on up to length 3 in practice, and chains are usually up to. There was a debate if to have them more than 3 or not, but you see that even if you bound them up to 5, it will jump from 172 to 194, at least in the historical data. So even in hindsight, those chains are where this chain was very useful. Now we do have more altruistic donors than one, and it's interesting to look at these numbers. And reality bodies give some more idea of them. This is data results, and they have simulation results, and it will be interesting to do the same exercise with real data. But you see that it's really, you don't want to stop chains. It does help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does this suggest we should revisit your first theorem, or sort of three-way exchanges, or not?
So you don't want to do just two-way things. So cycles.
So I suppose there's no altruistic donors.
So yes, then that theorem it's good for if kidney exchange will grow. Like we'll start getting like thousands of pairs, and we'll see and run the pair every month, and we'll still have something like that.
So have you looked at whether sort of four-way exchanges, how much four-way exchanges would help?
So yes, so here four-way exchange. So 189 to 169. So previous simulation, so yeah, you get extra 20.
So this is not the chains.
So up to here it's just cycles.
Ah.
So the decay is here the left is the chain, and here's the size of the cycle that is allowed, and the right is the size of the chain that is allowed.
Okay.
And here it's just cycles.
I see.
So even if we go to just four ways, we have if we get pools of size 1,000, 2,000, then that theorem will hold. If we're being this nice world. Yeah.
For this modeling, when you're assuming infinite chains, do you have a probability that someone will defect? Renege?
I don't have currently data on this too much. I have some, just a few samples from reneging. By reneging, I mean the chain has been done until this point, and now I'm reneging. It's there's other failures that I just don't accept. I've been told that I can match you, and I'm saying no, I don't want to match. But that's different. But so though the reneges that really happen in practice, that there's almost no reneges. But there's still failures. That it's the second type I just said, and that's a different problem. Then you want to take into account for that. So here's how a real AA graph, just the AA patients with AA donors pairs. Here's what it looks like. So it's far from being the nice perfect matching. Those guys, the shaded ones are the low sensitized AAs, and the other guys are highly sensitized. And if the blue lines are the ones that are part of cycles, and there's only one pair that is one highly sensitized pair that is part of a cycle. So you see all those hanging links there. If there was just altruistic donors to connect to them, you want to use them. Okay, and sometimes there's long ones. And this is an occurrence snapshot. So the meaning of who is over-demanding and who is under-demanding changes when you start looking highly sensitized and low sensitized. It's not just those O donors, it's really also your sensitivity. So if you're low sensitized, you're going to be over-demanded. People can connect to you easily. So it looks like a jellyfish. That was so the top of the jellyfish is this very connected components, or a very dense graph with the low sensitized, and those are the highly sensitized guys that if you can only stick here on altruistic donors, you can have those chains going on. Okay, you can have back and forth and so forth. So we wanted really to model sparse graphs and understand the connection between how if the graph is the size of the graph and its sparsity, and to understand how long chains or cycles do we need to get efficiency. Okay, and okay, so let's look at this. There's in the paper. This paper is with, that I'm talking about now is with David Gamarnik, Al Roth, and Mike Reese. And what I'm showing you here is just I'm going to choose sensitivity, probability to accept a donor for a low sensitized guy, and a probability to accept a donor for a highly sensitized guy. And for the presentation here, for the lecture here, I'm just choosing one type of sensitivity. We're giving in the paper different kinds of sparsity levels, or how sensitized you are to understand this trait. Okay, so here, with this n nodes, and now I'm going to drop what defined before. What's the size of the cycle? When we looked at the large graphs, what defined what's the size of the cycle that is needed is really the blood types. And when we're talking about highly sensitized patient, what defines the size of the cycle is going to be how sensitized the pool is, or how sparse the graph is. And so here, so I'm going to drop away the blood types for here, and just have n nodes. Everybody can be compatible to each other. There's going to be two types of nodes: those L nodes, low sensitized guys, and highly sensitized guys. Everybody can connect to each other, but with different probabilities. So highly sensitized can get a kidney with probability here pH over n. pH is a constant. Okay? So in the paper we have other levels of sparsity, of connectivity. And the low guys just get a kidney easily with a constant. Okay? So that's how you create the graph. You draw with some probability you're a low guy, with some probability you're a high guy. And what we see in the pool now is that low guys are with probability less than half. And the connectivities. Afterwards, that's what you randomize. And if you don't look at, if you just ignore, for example, low sensitized patients, with this level of sparsity, what you're going to find is that cycles of constant length, there's no such cycles. Okay? But there might be one big cycle. Now remember that a big cycle cannot be done in practice. So if you just had an altruistic donor to connect to some place in that long cycle, you could have done that chain. Okay, so there's there's no short ones, and therefore, at least between the highly sensitized, you cannot do anything. And so here's a short proof for this, and you can easily show this. Basically, the reason is because k is small, then everything the k doesn't matter. Okay, but I'll skip this. It's very simple. Okay, so here's what we show in the graph when the graph is when we do have a fraction of low sensitized patients, and we show that if you're looking at cycles of length k, fixed k, and now you want to check if increasing from k to k plus 1 is going to help you. So it's going to help you, and it's going to help you live in a linear amount. Okay? And the same holds even if you have only one altruistic donor. So if you have one, if I'm allowing cycles plus chains when it's an altruistic donor, and one without one altruistic donor, and I think about the altruistic donor can be just thought of as a low sensitized guy, because you can give him associate him with a virtual patient that can get from anyone. Okay, so what happens here is that what we're doing is looking for, first of all, you're looking at just the highly sensitized pool, and what you're going to see in this is a result from random graphs. I won't get too much into this, but you see many trees of every size k in this pool. So linear number of trees over the size k, which are also isolated, right? Just of this size, and that are isomorphic to one another. And what we're going to do next is connect those L guys. We're going to look for a maximum matching from the L guys to the H guys. They're going to connect to a linear number of those, beginning of those trees. And then going back is going to be very easy, so at least for some of them we're going to be able to get that. And when we increase from k to k plus 1, we're going to we use a simple technique to show that we can actually, we're going to count disjoint cycles and we'll be able to find that there's extra disjoint, linear number of disjoint cycles that we can do that are the size of k plus 1. So this is for this kind of sparsity. You can show that for any k, you can find a different level of sparsity that if you move from k to k plus 1, you allow up to k, you move from allowing up to k wave cycles to allowing up to k plus 1 cycles, you're going to get a linear increase. So you can easily define what this p, you can find it, and you can show that you'll find allocations that are linearly bigger than just allowing up. So what is going to happen in practice here is that all those guys, those are low sensitized guys. They can match even to each other. They don't need anyone. All of them are going to be matched. When you move to a longer, allow from k to k plus 1 or a longer chain, then who are you going to help is exactly those highly sensitized patients. So that's think about this as a kind of a Pareto improvement thing, but basically highly sensitized is the one that you want to increase those things in order to get to match more of those things. So we did some simulations about this, and I think the most interesting simulation is indeed this. So we modeled this. This is without not real data. This is simulated data. We modeled these pools. There's those random graphs. There's 8 patients, and some of them are low sensitized, some are high sensitized in the connectivity. And here, what you see is the x-axis again, the left is the size of the cycle that is allowed. The right is the size of the chain that is allowed. There's one, and we played with different number of non-directed donors in the pool. And the dashed lines are the high sensitized that are matched. On the left is the size of the pool. Is how many people are matched. So you see that the low sensitized, it doesn't matter to them too much if you increase the size, or don't increase the size. The highly sensitized is really important for those guys. So I think this is maybe this takeaway from this increasing the size, at least for now, the pool size that we see, that this is how important this is. And there's still a lot to understand. If we have many altruistic donors and some programs get more, do we want to have all of them running or not? So remember that the chain can end with a patient on the waiting list. That's also useful sometimes. So maybe we don't need all of them. Yeah. So this is the chain that this happened over 8 months, not 2 years, and it's a 30-length chain, 30 pairs. And in fact, there's so that guy is an altruistic donor. And here, for example, there's a compatible pair. So there's sometimes compatible pairs joining the system because they want to get maybe a better match. And that's also very useful. And remember that compatible pair is really useful if, for example, it's an over-demanded pair, if it's an AO donor, because he can increase this size and be more, those two sizes can become more equal. So compatible pairs are really useful and be interesting to talk about. So things I think are, so things I think are important, open problems to do are mechanisms, first of all, for the long run that think about, that will incentivize to give you the easy to match pairs. And now easy to match pair is someone who's, for example, low sensitized with a good donor. But looking at maybe at the long run, because current pools are not too big, and we really want to maybe count for how many pairs, how many highly sensitized I matched for each one of the transplants. This is one kind of mechanism. And other things we see in practice is sometimes that there are failures. So those chains, there's chains that if you do them alone, sometimes you do have someone that says, no, I don't want to accept this. And then do you do the chain up to here? Or, and then maybe find a bypass? Or do you cancel everything and re-optimize and things like that? These are interesting questions that I think are now current challenges to move forward. But yeah. Javier, you have some other interesting, any other challenges that you for today?
I know some of it because we know a lot about it. I think things about optimization, and you mentioned dynamic optimization and the dynamic integration.
Yeah, so dynamic optimization, because these things are dynamic, is how to end the chains, for example, today in order to get better value tomorrow. There's a lot of OR things. Yeah.
Is it possible that someone who needs a kidney has like two potential donors, like a mom has two kids, but she's not compatible with both of them, so she could have...
So you can register with more than one.
Okay.
And yeah, it happens. Probably less than 5%, but depends. But
does that like increase their probability of...
Yeah, if you bring more donors, you have more possibility to match. I'm drawing the graph for each of your donors who you're compatible with, but eventually you can participate in one exchange. So one of your donors is going to participate. So it increases. You can think about mechanisms that if I bring an O donor, it's more valuable than bringing an A donor and things like that. But it's a little bit problematic because you might start thinking that this is kind of paying or not too fair, or. But I think that we're doing this anyway implicitly, because if you bring an O donor anyway, you have a better chance. So you're not allowed to pay for kidneys, but the things you're doing now that are done now in practice, people didn't think at the beginning that would be allowed. So, for example, when we are talking about the incentives for hospitals and those kidney exchange committees, or then people are telling us, are you crazy giving incentives to hospitals? So we're saying, first of all, okay, if you're not going to give incentives, you're not going to see many pairs. But what we're doing now is also giving priorities to highly sensitized patients or to kids or to other things. Why is that? That's also kind of moving from a maximum allocation to some kind of favorable allocation. So it's not, I think there's room for trying things and for being a little bit provocative. People can say, no, this is not acceptable, this is close to paying, but there's still a lot to experiment. Yeah.
Are you aware of any other countries other than the US that have systematic approaches to kidney exchange?
So there's these kind of approaches in the Netherlands, in the UK, in Iran. They're selling, but they're selling for very cheap today. It's, I'm not sure. So maybe. So this is a bad slide for kidney exchange, but I have to show this. So when kidney exchange started in 2007 in the US, at least, there were 40,000 people on the waiting list, and there's still 90,000. It's not bad if kidney exchange. It's just that kidney exchange is not is making maybe this is narrowing the gap between supply and demand, but it's not good enough. If it doesn't grow, then big trouble. So, for example, OA pairs. If you don't get more compatible pairs into the system, they have no chance unless they get from some deceased donor. Okay, so you need so it's not clear to me that one day, or maybe soon even, we'll move to a system that is benefits for someone who donates a kidney. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the problem of knowing how to end the chain, but why end it?
Why to end it?
Yeah, why?
So there's not necessarily always reason to end it, but suppose you have 100 altruistic donors now, because altruistic donors are joining over time, and you have just 100 pairs now in the system. Why you don't need maybe all of them? One of them can help even more by giving to someone on the waiting list, a patient, right?
So it's not to dead end it in the pool of people with donors, it's to dead end it into the pool of people without donors.
Without?
So people on, say, the deceased donor list. So recipients who enter the pool, but with no donor that they're paired with already.
With someone with a no donor. So someone on the waiting list with no donor. I think we still don't understand really the benefit of chains, except that maybe longer is better, but we have to account for how many altruistic donors in the pool. But also, we want to really compute how beneficial is it to those highly sensitized. So if you're going to do some kind of experiment, is those highly sensitized, what types of pairs we're matching because we're doing long chains and things like that. All these has to be taken into account.
Another comment about this last question, there's also the issue of optimization. So it's just much more difficult to optimize with long chains. And then if you say, if it were true that chains of length 3 were enough, that's something we know how to solve optimally. And then you can just say, well, we know the optimal solution with any length chains.
But are these chains being formed? Like, does the system go out and say, I want to find a length 9 chain today? Or does the chain start?
So some of it is formed today, and to continue, you don't have to see the patients of tomorrow. So you can do 3 segments today that you find, 3 segments in different times that you found today. You found today all those 3 segments, and the bridge donor can wait for next month when you run. Also, how often to run the algorithm or things like that. There's lots of.
Give a sense of the impact of the second level cross-match tests on. So the graphs you were showing.
So that's after the graph that I'm showing is not is based on the antibodies that you show me for each patient and the antigens of the donor that you show me, and there's no real blood test that you see if really so it's a virtual. The test that checks if I'm compatible to a donor is called a cross-match test. And this graph is based only on the antibodies and antigens, and only after they show the match and people accept it, they go and do a cross-match. And there are failures. It used to be more. I think it's now around the 10%, which is pretty big. It's pretty high still. And I hope we get more and more data to understand exactly.
That's another issue with long cycles.
With long cycles and long chains.
Because the cycle, there's more chance, I guess, of failure in the process.
That's right. And then my guess, and we didn't see much data about this, but my guess is that there's more failures with people who are more highly sensitized, have more antibodies, and then you want to have short cycles, and maybe with just one highly sensitized. So I hope we get more data to understand this, and I don't know. My hope is that those programs will release data to the public and be able to do this.
Yeah, I was wondering if you guys have thought about other markets without money where this approach could be really helpful. Or any other place where we can apply it?
So I'm thinking now a little bit about markets for housing. So in Tel Aviv, for example, in Israel, the market for renting is very, very tough to find an apartment. So it turns out that there's a website. I don't know what's the traffic in this website, but people who want to exchange apartments. So I would for rent, but it's not very likely that I'm going to want your apartment and you want mine. But maybe there's a big cycle or chain, even if someone is just. I'm waiting to get into yours because it's very hard someone puts an apartment for rent, hundreds of people come at the same time and waiting for this to see if they can get this apartment. Most of them are not happy. Sometimes the person that rents the apartments also takes money to match you to the owner, or tells you you have to buy the furniture. So I think also in buying apartments, I think there are those. That's my guess that there are those chains that I don't want to sell before I find something, or the opposite. And I think there are those chains. But nobody looked at that. But I guess that there's exchanging apartments for vacation. There's a website for that. And they're looking for just 2 ways, but maybe there's more than that. Yeah.
I was going to ask what's currently being done in practice for the question of how to end a chain, whether to give to someone on the deceased donor list or to another paired donor.
What's the decision?
Yeah, so
so what happens in practice?
So,
by the way, this is another incentive issue. So, for example, in the National Kidney Registry, those altruistic donors usually come to transplant centers, and sometimes they don't show them to you because they can just map someone in their own center. But the National Kidney Registry tells you, if you show me an altruistic donor, I will end it with a patient in your center, or some chain. But that doesn't still answer when to end it. So when to end it, so it really differs between the exchange programs. So the National Kidney Registry decides to keep 2 or 3, up to 3 usually chains open. The other ones they try to end. If the donor of the last the last donor in the chain is very good, like an old donor, and then they might leave it open. But there's no real policies about this. That's why I think doing optimization is very interesting. Right now, everything, and these kind of things, the optimization part is very ad hoc. Okay. Yeah, so I'll end here.
Any final questions for time? Just thank you for some weird bullets.